Parents gave me until Friday to leave the house. Grandparents built. On Friday, I wasn't alone. My legal team was ready, and their faces went white. Sometimes life tosses you curveballs that you don't see coming. And for me, Celine, at 27, it was the gut-wrenching knowledge that my own flesh and blood would strive to take away everything my grandparents had built. They strutted in here, all smiles, believing they had me surrounded, gloating about handing over the house to my father's name, and told me I had till Friday to go. But their features contorted in amazement and bewilderment when they returned with a moving truck and saw who was waiting on my porch. Oh, that was completely priceless. And really, they deserved everything. To truly appreciate why I went to such great pains to preserve my grandparents' legacy, you must first comprehend the entire tale. My grandparents, Aldrich and Isolde Morgan, reared me since I was 5 years old. My parents, Garrick and Serafina, basically abandoned me to pursue their careers in another state. What they were really after was a life free of real responsibility, jumping from one get-rich-quick scheme to the next, each of which flopped spectacularly. My childhood home was not just ordinary house. It was a stunning Victorian situated in a historic neighborhood in Boston. This mansion had been in my grandfather's family for 3 generations, and it was part of a larger estate that comprised other important properties and investments valued approximately $3 million. Not a little fortune, right? But for me, that house was simply home. This is when I learnt the genuine meaning of family. Every morning, Grandma Isolde would wake me up with the most delicious smell of freshly cooked muffins. "Rise and shine, little lawyer," she'd say, long before I'd even considered law school. Grandpa Aldrich, bless his heart, taught me how to fish in the small pond at the neighborhood park. His patience seemingly limitless, even as I knotted my line repeatedly. In the evenings, we'd sit in the library, each buried in our own books and occasionally exchanging a section that piqued our interest. Those peaceful moments, those little encounters, meant everything to me. I learned from them the virtues that would shape my life: honesty, hard effort, and responsibility. Grandpa used to say, "Your word is your bond, Celine. Break it, and you lose something you can never buy back." Grandma, on the other hand, always emphasized education and independence. "A woman must be able to stand on her own 2 feet, she'd often say, especially when others try to knock her down. My relationship with my biological parents and younger sister Callista was, to put it mildly, problematic. They'd turn up around twice a year, generally around Christmas when gifts were expected, or any time they needed money. Every visit was the same: exaggerated adoration, then casual queries about Grandpa's finances, and eventually a tearful narrative about some unexpected expense, invariably followed by a request for a loan, which, of course, was never repaid. My father had filed for bankruptcy twice before I was even 10. Mom had dabbled in various questionable business ventures, peddling everything from miracle diet pills to timeshares. They lived far over their means, continuously looking for the next great chance that would eventually make them wealthy. Callista, 7 years younger than me, grew up observing and learning from them. By her adolescent years, she had perfected their manipulation and entitlement skills. "Your sister should come live with us too," Grandma once proposed after a particularly terrible visit, during which Callista stole money from my piggy bank. But my parents flatly refused. Callista was their baby, the child they could manage to raise because she required little actual parenting. As my grandparents became older, the family dynamic became increasingly tense. Dad began phoning more frequently, asking hard questions about their health, wills, and financial advisors. Mom would send links to retirement communities, quietly indicating that the house was too much for them to handle. Each visit became a cause of utter anxiety, with quiet conversations that abruptly ended as I entered a room. Through my school years, I prospered intellectually, thanks to my grandparents' unwavering support. While other children received new phones or fashionable clothing, my grandparents invested in books, museum memberships, and educational excursions. When I was 16, I began working part-time at the local library to help with expenditures. My grandparents argued it was unnecessary, but I could see how pharmaceutical prices and property taxes were stretching their limited money. My decision to pursue law was not simply a professional choice. It was heavily affected by an incident in our neighborhood when I was a senior in high school. The Wilsons, an elderly couple, lost their entire life savings after their son persuaded them to hand over power of attorney and subsequently emptied their accounts. The helplessness, the awful betrayal they faced, tormented me. I knew right away that I needed to learn how to prevent such abuses, particularly among vulnerable elders. College and then law school were difficult, particularly when my grandparents' health began to deteriorate. Grandpa experienced cardiac problems that required many surgeries. Grandma was diagnosed with early-stage dementia, I chose a local university so that I could live at home and care for them, turning down scholarships to more prominent schools further away. During my final year of law school, I was attending classes during the day, studying at night, and fitting in medical appointments and home care in between. It was completely taxing, yet they had given so much for me. It was just what family did. The day I graduated from law school was quite bittersweet. Standing there in my cap and gown, scanning the audience, I noticed Grandpa in his wheelchair, an oxygen tank beside him, and Grandma seated next to him, occasionally seeming bewildered but always beaming broadly when our gazes met. They insisted on attending despite their health worries. Wild horses couldn't keep us away, Grandpa said that morning, as I helped him tie his tie. My parents and Callista were obviously absent, despite being invited months in advance. Mom had texted that morning, offering some lame reason about car issues. I'd stopped expecting their presence at significant occasions in my life a long time ago, yet their absence still hurt, like a deep pain in my chest. Following the service, we dined at Grandpa's favorite Italian restaurant. He gave a shaky toast with his water glass. To our Celine, who makes us prouder every day. The finest granddaughter, and now the finest lawyer in Massachusetts. Grandma nodded heartily, adding, smart as a whip, just like her grandfather. Their pleasure in my accomplishment filled me with joy and fueled my drive to live up to their trust in me. During my final semester, I took an elective course in elder law and estate planning. Given my grandparents' situation, what began as a practical choice rapidly became a passionate obsession. Professor Lysandra Vey, a former prosecutor who specializes in elder abuse cases, introduced me to the frightening reality of financial exploitation of elders, frequently by their own family members. The greatest threat to elderly individuals' financial security rarely comes from strangers, Professor Vey informed our class. 70% of elder financial abuse is perpetrated by family members or trusted caregivers. The sense of betrayal is often more devastating than the financial loss. Her comments struck a deep chord with me, freezing to the bone. I immediately started looking at protective mechanisms, notably irrevocable trusts, that may protect assets from unscrupulous family members while allowing the elderly individual to maintain control during their lifetime. With increasing worry, I began to notice alarming connections between the case studies we reviewed and my own family circumstances. 2 weeks after graduation, I scheduled a private meeting with Draven Holt, an elder law specialist whom Professor Vey had suggested. I brought copies of my grandparents' financial paperwork, which I had access to because I had helped them manage their payments. Draven examined everything attentively, her countenance getting increasingly anxious. Your instincts are correct, she said finally. Given the pattern of behavior you've described, and these recent inquiries from your father about property values, there is serious cause for concern. An irrevocable trust would offer significant protection, but your grandparents would need to establish it voluntarily. Have you discussed this with them? I hadn't. Afraid they'd disregard my concerns out of loyalty to their son. That evening I mustered all of my bravery and gently broached the matter after supper. Grandpa originally reacted just as I had feared. Garrick has many flaws, but he would never try to take our home, he said, his voice husky with emotion. He is still my son, Celine. Grandma was quiet, twisting her wedding ring as she frequently did when nervous. What makes you think such a thing, dear? She finally asked. Reluctantly, I recounted all I had noticed, the increased frequency of visits whenever their health deteriorated, the incessant questioning about their assets, and the not-so-subtle suggestions that the house was too much work. Then I showed them something I had kept private, an email from Dad to a real estate agent inquiring about comparable sales in their neighborhood and the prospective market worth of their home, which I had uncovered while assisting Grandpa with his computer. Grandma began crying silently. He borrowed $50,000 5 years ago, she told me, her voice shaking, for a business opportunity that couldn't wait. He promised to pay it back with interest, but when your grandfather asked about it last Christmas, he became angry. Said we were wealthy enough not to miss it, that we owed him for taking you in instead of him. Grandpa's face had become very pale, with the color draining from it. Show me that trust information again, he finally concluded, his tone heavy with resignation. 3 days later, we met with Draven Holt and began the process of establishing the Morgan Family Trust. The legal process was difficult, with numerous meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, and the bank. We created the trust so that my grandparents had complete authority and profit from all assets during their lifetime. However, after their death, I would become the trustee. The property, investment portfolio, and other significant possessions were transferred to the trust, shielding them from potential claims or manipulation. Throughout the procedure, we maintained complete confidentiality. My grandparents didn't tell anyone about the arrangement, including their closest friends. I was still living with them, working at a small legal company dealing in family law, and starting my career while also caring for them. To outsiders, nothing had changed, but I slept better knowing that their legacy and home were finally safe from whatever plots my parents were planning. About 6 months after we established the trust, Grandpa's health deteriorated dramatically. We thought his weariness was caused by his heart issue, but it was actually advanced stage pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim. 3 to 6 months at most. We were completely devastated. My parents learned of his diagnosis quite fast. Suddenly they began phoning daily and visiting weekly, which was completely uncommon in all of the years I had lived with my grandparents. Callista even took a leave of absence from her work at a nail salon to assist, albeit her assistance mostly consisted of searching through closets and cupboards and documenting valuable objects when she thought no one was looking. One evening, I overheard my parents talking in the garden. They assumed everyone was sleeping, but I had been up buying medication for Grandpa. "Once the old man is gone, we need to move quickly before she has time to hide anything," my dad said. "Mom is so confused these days. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." "What about Celine?" Mom inquired, her voice tinged with dread. "She's always watching, and now she's a lawyer." "She's a brand new lawyer with student loans and no real experience," he said. "We'll offer her a small portion to keep quiet. If she makes trouble, we'll contest any will on grounds of undue influence. After all, she's been living here, dependent on them, possibly manipulating them. Who would believe her over us? The actual children." I stood frozen, the glass of water in my hand warming, as they discussed how they would sell the house, liquidate investments, and finally live the lifestyle they desired. Callista joined them, eagerly contributing her own thoughts about which antiques would garner the highest prices, and I felt violently uncomfortable. The next morning, I checked in with Draven Holt, who confirmed that all of the trust documents had been properly filed and were unquestionably valid. She reassured me that the protection was strong, but cautioned me against any attempts to have my grandma sign fresh documents after my grandfather died. As Grandpa weakened, he sensed the vultures circling. One night, as I sat with him and he battled to breathe comfortably, he grabbed my hand with unexpected power. "Promise me you will protect your grandmother and this house," the man said. "It is not just property, Celine. It is the physical embodiment of our family history, our love, our sacrifices." Garrick never understood that. He sees only dollar signs, whereas I see memories. I promised, tears flowing down my cheeks, and he nodded in satisfaction. He entered a coma 3 days later. He died quietly the next morning, with Grandma and me by his bedside. The funeral was quiet and solemn, exactly as Grandpa would have wanted. A few close friends, neighbors, and former colleagues came together to commemorate his life. My parents and Callista arrived 20 minutes late, dressed poorly for a funeral, and left immediately after the service, citing a long road ahead. Before departing, Dad grabbed me aside and directly inquired about the will and when it would be read. I gave a brief eulogy that highlighted Grandpa's honesty, calm wisdom, and unconditional love. Looking out at the modest gathering, I understood that a life well lived is defined by the love shared rather than the wealth earned. Grandpa had been extremely wealthy by that standard. Following the funeral, the reality of becoming Grandma's primary caregiver weighed heavily on me. Her dementia had been growing slowly, but grief has hastened her demise. Some days she recognized me immediately. On other days, she'd keep asking when Grandpa was coming home. Each time I had to gently remind her that he was no longer with her, watching her grief all over again. I modified my work schedule to allow me to spend more time at home, focusing on cases that could be completed remotely. I hired Thalia, a kind home health aide, to remain with Grandma when I was at work or in court. In the evenings we formed new rituals. Watching classic movies that Grandma recalled from her childhood, looking through old photo albums, and reading aloud from her favorite novels. These activities appeared to stabilize her, providing islands of clarity amid her increasingly hazy mental condition. My parents called on occasion, constantly inquiring about Grandma's health in a tone that appeared more like checking on an investment than expressing genuine care. I offered scant information each time, becoming more protective as Grandma's condition weakened. 6 months after Grandpa's death, Grandma contracted pneumonia. Despite rigorous treatment, her frail system was unable to combat the virus. Her dying days were spent peacefully at home, in her own bed, as she had desired. I read to her from Jane Austen, her favorite author, and played classical music that she and Grandpa had enjoyed. On her last night she experienced perfect lucidity. She stared at my hand and squeezed it. "Elizabeth," she said, misunderstanding me for my mother. "I am so proud of the woman you have become. So different from—" She trailed off before refocusing. Take care of our Celine." Before I could correct her confusion, she had fallen back asleep. She never awoke again, drifting peacefully through the night, her hands still in mine. The funeral was much smaller than Grandpa's. My parents did not attend, instead sending a generic floral arrangement and a card signed by their secretary. I wasn't surprised, just saddened by my realization of their true nature. I buried my grandma next to my grandfather at the modest cemetery where generations of Morgans repose, comforted by the fact that they were finally reunited. I returned to an empty house reverberating with memories both comfortable and disturbing. For the first time, I was genuinely alone, without my grandparents, who had served as my anchors and true north. But I was also strengthened by their loving legacy and the principles they instilled in me. I would honor them by preserving what they had created and using it as they would have liked. 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral, while I was still adjusting to the house's silence and the magnitude of my loss, the doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. When I opened the door, I saw my parents and Callista waiting there, melancholy emotions carefully placed on their faces. "Oh, Celine," Mom shouted, pulling me into a stiff hug that felt more staged than genuine compassion. "We are so sorry about Mom. We came as soon as we could clear our schedules." Dad nodded solemnly. "Family needs to stick together in times like these," he remarked, patting my shoulder awkwardly before moving past me into the foyer, his gaze already fixed on the antique furnishings and artwork. Callista, a 20-year-old dressed like a teenager, gave me a short side hug. "This house is even bigger than I remembered," she said, not trying to hide her opinion of its value. I welcomed them in with politely, offering coffee and the sweets I had purchased the day before. As we gathered in the living room, the conversation followed a script I might have written ahead of time, starting with a few inquiries about Grandma's dying days and rapidly moving on to inheritance. "Have you had a chance to look through her papers?" Dad inquired, trying a casual demeanor. "I assume there's a will that needs to be probated." "I'm handling everything," I said neutrally. Her affairs were in good order. Mom leaned forward, her voice falling to what she most likely assumed was a compassionate tone. "You must be so lonely in this big house, all by herself. It's a lot for one person to maintain." "Actually, I'm managing fine," I told myself. "I love this house." "Well, of course you do, sweetie," Mom replied with a patronizing smile. "But realistically, a young woman like you should be in a modern apartment downtown, close to other young professionals. Your father and I have been thinking we could help you sell this place and find something more suitable." Dad nodded warmly. "Property values in this neighborhood are at an all-time high. It would be smart to sell now before the market shifts. And of course," Callista said as she inspected her nail polish, "whatever comes from Grandma and Grandpa's estate should be divided fairly between family members. I mean, just because you lived with them doesn't mean you get everything, right?" Their transparency was nearly laughable. If I hadn't been so distraught and humiliated, I may have chuckled at how poorly they concealed their avarice. Instead, I just replied that I would not make any decisions concerning the house in the near future, and changed the subject. They remained for 3 days, and I found my mother looking through Grandma's jewelry box when she thought I was on a work call. My father was measuring rooms and snapping photos, ostensibly for memories. Callista was continually attempting to extract information from Thalia concerning bank accounts and safe deposit boxes. On the second evening, I strolled out onto the back porch for some fresh air and overheard my father on the phone, talking with someone about real estate valuations. "The house shows at least $3.2 million in this market," he said. "Maybe more with some updates. We just need to move quickly once we have control." Later that night, I discovered a browser window left open on Callista's laptop which had search results for challenging a trust and disputing inheritance. When I looked through the surfing history, I saw searches for local estate attorneys and methods to prove undue influence. The following morning, I confronted them gently over breakfast. "I noticed you all seem very interested in the house and Grandma's assets," I said with no emotion. "Is there something specific you're hoping to find?" Dad flushed red but immediately recovered. "Just trying to help you sort things out, honey. You have enough on your plate with your new career and all this grief." Mom nodded vigorously. "We're just concerned about you, darling. Such responsibility for someone so young. And we want to make sure everything is fair." Callista pointed out. "Grandma and Grandpa might have been confused in their later years." I just nodded and stated I appreciated their concern, but had everything under control. They left later that day, promising to return soon to aid more. When their automobile pulled away, I called Draven Holt and informed her of the circumstances. She encouraged me to be cautious, but assured me that the trust was secure. I didn't hear from them for several weeks. I started to hope they'd accepted the situation and moved on. I was deep into a new case at work, finally establishing a routine that didn't revolve around caring, when they reappeared unexpectedly. As I was going for work, all three marched up the front way with triumphant faces. Dad was carrying a packet with documents. "Good morning, Celine," he replied, his tone tinged with feigned pity. "We hate to do this, but we need to talk about your living situation." Mom stepped forward with a strained smile. "We found some papers in our safe deposit box. An older will that your grandparents signed years ago, leaving everything to your father as their only child. We had it verified by an attorney," Callista said excitedly. "We also have papers showing the house has been signed over to Dad. The trust you think protects everything. Apparently not valid when there's a prior will." Dad extended the folder toward me. "We're not unreasonable. We'll give you until Friday to pack your belongings. We've already found a buyer for the house." I glanced at their smug expressions and the folder containing what I was sure were bogus documents and felt a strange peace settle over me. "You really think I would let that happen?" I murmured gently. Their confidence wavered briefly, but Dad immediately recovered. "This is happening whether you like it or not. Friday, Celine. Be out by noon." When they turned to leave, I called after them. "Before you do anything irrevocable, you might want to consult a better lawyer. One who knows the difference between a genuine will and a fabrication." Dad's face clouded. "Don't threaten me, young lady. You're not the only one who knows about the law." With that final shot, they fled, completely certain in their victory. When my family left with their threats and phony documents, I went into action. My legal training kicked in, as did the powerful protective impulses that my grandparents had instilled in me. It was no longer simply about the inheritance. It was about keeping my vow to maintain my grandparents' legacy, while also standing up to years of manipulation and entitlement. First, I called Calum Ward, my firm's top litigator and fraud specialist. "Can you come over tonight?" I inquired. "My family is trying to steal my grandparents' estate with forged documents. They're giving me until Friday to vacate." Calum arrived within an hour, accompanied by his paralegal. I put out everything: the trust documents, my grandparents' medical certificates demonstrating they were competent to sign, the diary I'd kept scrupulously chronicling my parents' suspicious behavior, and my memory of the bogus claims they'd just made. "If what they showed you is what I think it is, they are committing several felonies," Calum stated, his demeanor severe. "Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception. But we need to see those documents to be certain." My next call went to Draven Holt, who had helped form the trust. "They're making their move," I informed her. "And it's as brazen as we feared." Draven remained reassuringly quiet. "The trust is ironclad, Celine, but we should file for an emergency injunction to prevent any recording of fraudulent deeds or transfers. I'll draft it tonight and file first thing tomorrow." As my legal team prepared, I moved to actual security measures. I called a locksmith, and he arrived that afternoon to change all of the locks in the house. Next, I hired a security company to install cameras at all entrances. By evening, the house was secure from unauthorized intrusion. I called my bank one last time to confirm that all accounts had been secured and reported for odd behavior. The bank manager, who had known my grandparents for decades, was shocked by my position and personally set alerts on everything related to the estate. As night fell, I organized all of the trust's documents, making numerous copies and storing them in various locations. One in my house safe, another with Calum, a third with Draven, and digital versions encrypted in cloud storage. No single point of failure might jeopardize our security. That evening, as I was evaluating everything, my phone started ringing non-stop with calls from my parents and Callista. I let them all go to voicemail. The texts began gently, with Dad recommending we speak it out like adults, but gradually escalated into explicit threats. "You have no idea who you are messing with," was my father's final voicemail. "And you will respect me. That house and money are rightfully mine, and I will have them one way or another." The next morning, I met with a bigger legal team led by Calum and Draven. Mireille Duval, a specialist in estate litigation, examined our documentation and approach. "Their claim about a prior will taking precedence over the trust is completely without merit," she informed me. "Once assets are transferred into an irrevocable trust, they are no longer part of the estate to be distributed by will. Any competent lawyer would know this, which suggests they either have a very bad attorney or, more likely, no legitimate attorney at all." We devised a multifaceted strategy. First, an injunction prohibiting any property transfers. Second, a cease and desist letter questioning their bogus claims. And third, Preparation for a possible lawsuit for harassment and attempted fraud if they persisted. What about the documents they claim to have? I asked them. The supposed earlier will and property transfer? If they attempt to file those anywhere, we will immediately challenge them as fraudulent, Mireille told me. We have substantial evidence of your grandparents' intentions through the properly executed trust. Plus we have their medical records showing they were mentally competent, the ongoing journal you kept and witnesses like Thalia who can testify to their clear wishes. While the legal team worked, I began gathering information regarding my parents' history of financial impropriety through diligent study and contacts from law school. I documented my father's 2 bankruptcies, a tax lien, and a small claims judgment against my mother for a failed business venture in which she received investments but never produced anything. By Thursday afternoon my family's desperation was evident. Callista wrote a rambling letter on social media, saying that I had misled our sick grandparents and stolen the family legacy. She tagged extended family members and elderly neighbors, in an attempt to rouse public opinion against me. My parents adopted a more direct approach, showing up to my law practice unexpectedly, and wanting to talk with me. When the receptionist stated that I was in court, they refused to go, raising such a scene that security had to remove them out. My coworkers were stunned but extremely supportive. The incident simply increased their determination to assist me. Later that day, I discovered from a worried neighbor that my father had been going door to door on my street, informing people that I was mentally unwell and soliciting community support for their seizure of the property. Fortunately, most neighbors had known my grandparents and me for years and were wary of these unexpected, anxious relatives they had rarely seen. As Friday approached, I prepared for every eventuality. Calum would join me at the house, along with Draven and a notary public, to observe any contacts. Thalia would also be present, prepared to testify on my grandparents' mental health and stated wishes if necessary. I contacted the local police, outlining the circumstances and asked that they be prepared to respond if my family attempted forced entrance or caused a disturbance. The officer I spoke with took comprehensive notes and promised to flag the location for swift action. Finally, I installed legal recording devices in the main rooms of the house to ensure that any confrontations were documented. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state for recordings, however I posted obvious signs informing all entrants that audio and video recording was taking place, which satisfied the notification requirement. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep because my mind was racing with scenarios. But beneath the fear lay a foundation of certainty. I was doing exactly what my ancestors would have wanted. Safeguarding the home they had lovingly preserved for generations from people who saw it solely as a source of income. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would confront it with the courage and integrity they had instilled in me. Friday morning dawned sunny and bright. A wonderful spring day that entirely contradicted the storm developing in my household affairs. I awoke early after a sleepless night, showered, and dressed carefully in a professional blue suit, instinctively reaching for the pearl earrings Grandma had given me for my law school graduation. For important days, she had stated. This surely qualifies. My support team had arrived by 8:30. Calum arrived first, bringing coffee and a calming confidence. We have everything covered legally, he told me. Today is just about standing your ground. Draven then arrived with the notary public, Octavia, a somber woman who had watched hundreds of property disputes. Thalia arrived shortly after, giving me a motherly hug before taking up position in the kitchen, where she began stress baking, the aroma of cinnamon buns quickly filling the house. Mireille Duval completed our team by delivering copies of the emergency injunction obtained by the court the previous day, which prohibited the registration of any property transfers relating to the estate. Just in case they try to go directly to the Registry of Deeds, she told me. We positioned ourselves strategically. My family and I would meet on the front porch, which served as a metaphorical threshold for them to cross. The rest would stay inside, out of sight, but ready to go forward if necessary. The folder with the pertinent trust paperwork, the injunction, and documentation of the estate's protected status sat on the tiny table opposite the porch swing, providing a visual counterbalance to whatever bogus papers my family could present. At 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before their self-imposed deadline for my eviction, a black SUV came up to the curb. Behind it was a big moving truck, its engine roaring as it double-parked on the tight roadway. Several neighbors interrupted their gardening to witness the spectacle. My father was the first to emerge from the SUV, dressed in what he most likely thought was excellent business attire. A slightly too tight suit with sparkling cufflinks. My mother followed, her face set in grim determination, fashionable sunglasses covering her eyes. Callista came out last, virtually bouncing with excitement, phone in hand, as if eager to film her victory. Behind them, 2 men came off from the moving truck, visibly uncomfortable as they sensed the tension. My father waved them forward, impatiently. I stood up carefully from the porch swing, holding the folder in my hand, and waited. Allow them to come to me on my territory, the home that my grandparents had given to me. Right on time to witness your departure, I see, my father said as they neared the front walk. I hope you're packed and ready to go. He waved the packet he was carrying, which likely contained his false documents. As they approached, I stood erect on the porch steps, remaining silent. Several neighbors had crept closer, sensing drama and possibly afraid for my safety. We brought a truck to help with your things, my mother continued in a deceptively pleasant manner intended to convey a sense of familial concern to the onlookers. We know this must be difficult. As they approached the bottom of the porch stairs, I finally spoke. Before you come any further, I should inform you that this property is under video and audio surveillance, and there are witnesses inside the house. Anything you say or do is being recorded. That caused them to pause for a second. My father recovered first, his grin tightening. Always the dramatic one, Celine. This doesn't change anything. We have legal documents giving us ownership of this property. He waved his folder again. You mean your forged documents? I inquired quietly. The ones that supposedly override an irrevocable trust established over a year ago, when both my grandparents were alive and legally competent. My mother's smile wavered. Callista stared uncertainly at her parents, the script clearly not going as intended. My father's expression clouded as he ascended the first 2 steps. Now you listen here. This house belongs to me. My parents wanted me to have it. Whatever you tricked them into signing when they were sick doesn't change that. When the front door opened behind me, Calum stepped out, followed by Draven, Murray, Octavia the notary, and Thalia. My father was taken aback when he saw 5 individuals who were clearly professional and well prepared. Mr. Morgan, Calum replied with a smile. I am Calum Ward, attorney for the Morgan Family Trust. I believe you were just about to accuse your daughter of fraud and undue influence. Please continue. We are recording for the court. My father's mouth opened and closed silently. My mother grabbed his arm and whispered urgently. The moving truck men moved uneasily, with one checking his watch. Perhaps you should inform the movers that they will not be needed today, I said quietly. Or any day. My father finally found his voice and said, This is ridiculous. I have a legal right to this property. I have documentation right here. He waved the folder again, but made no attempt to open it. Murray walked forward, her professional manner unflappable. As counsel for the estate, I must inform you that we have obtained an emergency injunction preventing any recording of fraudulent property transfers related to this estate. She held out a copy of the court order. Additionally, I should warn you that presenting forged documents is a felony in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. My father's face lost its color. My mother stepped forward, taking a different approach. Celine, honey, there has clearly been a misunderstanding. We only want what is best for the family. Perhaps we can discuss this privately, without all these people. There is nothing to discuss, I stated firmly. Grandma and Grandpa established the Morgan Family Trust to protect their assets and legacy. All properties and investments are held by the trust, which I manage as the designated trustee. This was their choice, made freely while they were alive and well. Any documents you have claiming otherwise are fraudulent. My father's irritability bubbled over. This is not over, Celine. I am your father. That counts for something legally. I will fight this to the Supreme Court if necessary. I will make sure everyone knows how you manipulated 2 elderly people. Your reputation will be ruined. Calum moved forward again. Mr. Morgan, are you threatening to file frivolous lawsuits and engage in defamation, because that would constitute harassment and possibly extortion? Should I add that to the record? The moving truck driver approached with caution. Sir, we're on the clock here. Are we moving anything or not? My father ignored him, his face distorted with anger. You ungrateful little. After everything we have done for you. I couldn't hold back a quick, astonished laugh. Everything you have done for me? You abandoned me when I was 5 years old. Grandma and Grandpa raised me, loved me, taught me everything important about life and family. You showed up only when you needed money or thought there was something to gain. The bare truth hovered in the air between us. Callista too appeared embarrassed, with her phone dropped and no longer capturing the humiliating scene. I have something else you should hear, I added, taking out my phone. I played the recording I had taken of their chat in the yard during Grandpa's final days, their voices clear as they plotted to use Grandma's bewilderment and completely block me out. My mother gave a gasp. My father's face turned an awful purple. "That is illegal," he muttered. "You cannot record people without their knowledge." "Actually," Draven interrupted, "Massachusetts law permits recording if the person recording is a party to the conversation or has consent from a party. Celine was present and consented to her own recording. Perfectly legal." Several police officers had arrived by this point, in response to calls from worried neighbors about the increasing confrontation. As they neared, my father seemed to realize the hopelessness of his position. "This is not over," he growled as he backed down the stairs. "Family should not treat family this way." "On that, we completely agree," I said softly. The cops inquired whether there was a problem. I briefly mentioned that my family had made false assumptions regarding property ownership, but that everything was under control. My legal team supplied more information by giving the officers the trust documents and the injunction. Defeated but undeterred, my parents and sister returned to their SUV. The moving truck drove away, its job unfulfilled. As they drove away, I felt no triumph, only deep regret for what family should have been, but never was in my situation. Thalia gripped my shoulder. "Your grandparents would be very proud," she added softly. "So very proud." Standing on the porch my grandfather had constructed, surrounded by people who had showed more concern and loyalty than my biological relations, I realized she was correct. It had never been about money or property. It had been about honoring the genuine meaning of family and keeping the promises we make to those we care about. Following the incident on the porch, numerous practical problems needed to be addressed. Calum completed the necessary papers to establish a permanent record of the trust's legitimacy and my role as trustee. Draven assisted me in obtaining further legal protection against potential future problems. The local police, already familiar with the situation, increased patrols past the house for several weeks. Most surprisingly, the district attorney's office approached me about filing charges for attempted fraud and forgery. Despite my family's activities, I decided not to seek criminal charges against them. Not because of residual affection, but because I knew my grandparents would have preferred that I take the high road. The DA supported my decision, but he kept the case open just in case. For several months I lived with chronic anxiety, leaping at unexpected sounds and frequently monitoring security camera feeds. My parents attempted a couple more contacts, swinging between threats of unending litigation and heartfelt calls to family devotion. When it became evident that the trust was truly unbreakable and that I had substantial evidence of their false objectives, the correspondence ceased immediately. Living alone in the house that had formerly been filled with my grandparents' love and wisdom was both comforting and painful. Every room contained memories. Grandpa reading in his favorite chair by the fireplace, Grandma humming in the kitchen as she cooked Sunday supper, and the two of them dancing slowly to old records in the living room while they thought I was upstairs studying. The silence was occasionally unbearable. I found myself talking aloud to them, asking for advice or simply sharing my day, just as I did when they were still living. Sometimes I imagined hearing Grandpa's deep chuckle or smelling Grandma's perfume. Grief, I realized, does not take a straight route. It returns unexpectedly, prompted by a familiar sound or the change of seasons. Recognizing that I needed help processing what had happened, I began visiting Dr. Ira Vaughn, a grieving and family trauma therapist. Her patient questioning helped me untangle the complicated emotions. Grief for my grandparents, rage at my parents, betrayal, guilt for occasionally wishing for a normal family, and a profound loneliness that appeared to have no bottom. "What you are experiencing is complicated grief, Dr. Vaughn remarked during one session. You are not only mourning your grandparents, but also the loss of the idea of family as it should be. That is a significant double loss. Working with Mary taught me to divorce my parents' conduct from my own worth. To understand that their avarice and manipulation were a reflection of their character defects, not my own failures. Most significantly, I realized that family is defined not only by blood, but also by love, respect, and mutual care. My legal company partners provided unexpected help. Calum and his wife, Elowen, welcomed me to holiday dinners. Mireille checked in on a frequent basis with coffee and discussion. Even the generally reticent senior partners demonstrated their care by mentoring and participating in crucial cases. Around 6 months after the confrontation, I took the difficult decision to renovate parts of the house. Not to eliminate my grandparents' presence, but to incorporate their legacy into my own destiny. I preserved Grandpa's library, complete with his volumes and beautiful leather chair, but turned an empty bedroom into a modern home office. Grandma's kitchen stayed mostly unaltered, though I did add modern equipment that she would have enjoyed using. The most major impact occurred when I founded the Aldrich and Isolde Morgan Scholarship Fund at my law school, which supports students interested in elder law and the protection of vulnerable groups. Using a portion of the trust's assets in this manner felt fitting, as it continued their generous spirits while also creating something positive from our family's tragic history. My working life has evolved as well. Based on my personal experience, I refocused my legal practice only on elder law and estate planning. Working with families to establish trusts and protective measures to prevent the type of exploitation my parents attempted became extremely rewarding. Each customer protected seemed like a modest win, a positive rippling effect of my grandparents' wise decision to form our trust. Slowly, I formed a new kind of family around me. Thalia continued to pay regular visits, now as a friend rather than an employee. My neighbors, who had witnessed the drama on my doorstep, grew closer and invited me to block parties and community gatherings. I joined a book group that met monthly, and I found connection via sharing stories, just like I had with my grandparents. 2 years after our argument on the porch, I received a little envelope in the mail with no return address. Callista left a tiny letter inside saying, "I apologize for what happened. They were wrong. I was mistaken. I miss you." There was no request for money, no mention of the property or estate, only a simple acknowledgement, and what appeared to be sincere regret. After much thought, I responded with an equally simple note. "Thank you for mentioning that. It matters." I did not initiate more contact, but did leave the door slightly ajar. It was unclear what would happen next, but the exchange felt like a small step toward healing, if not reconciliation. I've had no touch with my folks since that day. Sometimes I see their names in my email spam folder, or I get a missed call from an unknown number that could be theirs. I have accepted that we will never have a healthy relationship. That acceptance, however terrible it was to achieve, has been liberating. And the most deep lesson of this journey has been that family does not guarantee affection or loyalty. True family, whether by blood or by choice, must be founded on respect, honesty, and true caring. My grandparents taught me the true meaning of family. In their absence, I've discovered new ways to commemorate their legacy by forming my own chosen family of friends and mentors. I still perch on the porch swing some evenings, especially in spring when Grandma's garden blooms. The house doesn't feel empty anymore, but rather full of memories and fresh possibilities. My grandparents established a trust that secured more than simply their possessions. It provided a base on which I could rebuild and flourish following loss. For anyone dealing with comparable family and inheritance issues, my advice is straightforward. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And remember that protecting yourself from exploitation honors those who actually loved you. Standing up to those who would exploit the vulnerable is not selfish. It is an act of bravery and integrity.